In the first quarter of 2025, China added 76.75 million kilowatts of solar and wind power capacity. That's the equivalent of installing over 100 solar panels every single second. By the end of March, combined wind and solar installations hit 1.482 billion kilowatts, marking a historic moment when they officially surpassed the country's total coal-fired power capacity of 1.45 billion kilowatts. This wasn't just another milestone. It was the point where China's energy balance tipped decisively toward clean energy. The numbers behind this tell an even bigger story. China now controls 80% of global solar panel production capacity, 60% of wind turbine manufacturing, and a staggering 90% of lithium battery production. In 2024 alone, China invested over $625 billion in clean energy, accounting for nearly a third of global investment. The International Energy Agency projects that global energy investment will reach $3.3 trillion in 2025. With China leading the charge for years running, driving down clean technology costs worldwide. But here's the thing, this industrial revolution didn't just happen on its own. Behind it lies a decade-long national strategy that's cost hundreds of billions of dollars. When a country throws its full weight behind a single industry, what's the economic logic at play? And more importantly, how is it reshaping the world as we know it? Back in 2010, China had just overtaken Japan to become the world's second largest economy, but it was facing a classic development trap. Sure, it had become the world's factory, but it was stuck at the bottom of the global value chain. Chinese manufacturing back then ran on one thing: rock-bottom labor costs. In Shenzhen's factories, young workers assembled rechargeable batteries, phone components, and solar panels by hand. Costs were half of what Japanese and Korean companies paid, but the profits? Razor thin. And the core technology? Someone else owned it. Economists call this the smile curve problem. The ends of the production chain, research and branding, capture the fat profits. The middle, where manufacturing sits, scrapes by on pennies. The bigger problem was that this model had hit a wall. As wages climbed, the cost advantage started slipping away. Technical dependence became a bottleneck. High-end components had to be imported. Environmental damage was unsustainable. In 2010, 80% of China's electricity came from burning coal. Economists have a term for this situation: the middle income trap. When growth driven by raw inputs hits a ceiling, you either shift to innovation-driven growth or you stall out. Take the auto industry as an example. In 2010, Chinese car makers barely cracked the global top 20, way behind General Motors, Volkswagen, and Toyota. The electric vehicle market barely existed. Global annual sales? Less than 50,000 units. Both the technology and the market seemed light years away. Then in 2015, a strategic document called Made in China 2025 came out. It didn't mince words about the diagnosis. Chinese manufacturing was big but not strong, lacking innovation, dependent on foreign countries for core technologies. The document identified 10 key sectors for breakthroughs. Electric vehicles and renewable energy became the focal points. Why clean energy? The economic calculus was clear. The market was massive. After the 2015 Paris Agreement, global energy transition became a consensus goal. The technology was catchable. Unlike semiconductors, the core principles behind solar panels, wind turbines, and batteries were relatively mature, mainly an engineering and scaling challenge. The supply chain was extensive. It could drive dozens of upstream and downstream industries, high return on investment. But companies couldn't break through the technical barriers, market development, and infrastructure needs on their own. Over the next decade, an unprecedented national mobilization began. If you want to understand what happened between 2015 and 2025, the key word is systemic support. This wasn't just handing out a few subsidies, it was a complete resource allocation system covering fiscal policy, finance, land, and procurement. In 2019, government spending on industrial support hit $400 billion, equal to 1.7% of GDP. Compare that to South Korea at 0.8%. The US and Germany at 0.4%. This wasn't a difference of degree, It was a difference of magnitude. How was the money spent? The most direct form was cash subsidies. Starting in 2009, electric vehicle purchases got subsidized. Early on, $2,700 per car. That later dropped to $1,500. But because sales exploded, total subsidies in 2022 hit. From 2009 to 2017, the EV industry received $61 billion in government support, covering 23% of vehicles' cost. Wind turbine makers, Goldwind and Mingyang each pulled in over $160 million in subsidies. From an economic perspective, this is compensating for positive externalities. Clean energy generates environmental benefits. Government subsidies internalize those social benefits, but scale matters. When subsidies cover nearly a quarter of a car's price, you're not fine-tuning the market, you're rebuilding it. More subtle was the distortion of factor prices. Local governments provided industrial land at rock-bottom prices, sometimes free. Renewable energy companies enjoyed feed-in tariff subsidies, selling electricity at higher rates than coal plants. In early 2025, Jiangsu province straight-up cut industrial electricity prices by 9% to support local industry. In economics, this is called a dual-track system for factor markets. The same resource gets different prices for different uses. It artificially lowers manufacturing costs. But the trade-off is distorted resource allocation. The financial system was key backing. State-owned enterprises control 60% of banking assets, meaning they can lend based on industrial policy rather than pure risk pricing. Manufacturing loans have surged in recent years because policy demands shifting capital from real estate to advanced manufacturing. Interest rates run well below market levels. This is policy-based finance. Financial resource allocation serves strategic goals, but taxpayers or depositors bear the risk. State sector procurement created early demand. In 2011, Shenzhen gave a local car maker the biggest electric bus order in history. At the time, the technology wasn't mature and costs were sky-high. No commercial buyer would touch it. In 2020, when Eneo was on the brink of bankruptcy, the Hefei city government spent $1 billion to buy a 24% stake and bail them out. In economics, this is called a strategic buyer. State entities create demand regardless of cost, helping emerging industries cross the valley of death. These supports stacked to create a stunning effect. Not just automakers got subsidies, tire factories, glass plants, plastics manufacturers, battery makers all enjoyed low land prices, low electricity rates, and low interest loans within the same system. Costs were systematically compressed across the entire supply chain. Add in the learning curve effect. Output doubles, costs drop 15 to 30%. China's output dominates globally, so its learning curve is the steepest. The result was a spiral of falling costs. In 2025, Bloomberg New Energy Finance predicts clean energy technology costs will drop another 2 to 11%. In 2024, battery storage costs already fell by a third. Solar module prices dropped 21%, even below production cost. 10 years later, the results are striking. In the first quarter of 2025, national renewable energy installations added 76.75 million kilowatts, up 21% year over year, accounting for about 90% of new capacity. By the end of March, combined wind and solar installations hit 1.482 billion kilowatts, historically surpassing coal power's 1.45 billion kilowatts. In the first half of 2025, total clean energy installations reached 1.38 billion kilowatts, making up 49% of total capacity. In the first quarter, combined wind and solar generation hit 516.8 billion kilowatt-hours, accounting for 22.5% of total electricity consumption. That already exceeded both tertiary industry consumption and urban-rural residential consumption. By the end of 2025, solar power is expected to reach 1.1 billion kilowatts, wind power 640 million kilowatts. Their combined dominance over coal will become the new normal. Chinese carmakers pulled off a comeback too. In June 2025, China captured 36% of the global auto market, with 3 Chinese companies cracking the world's top 10. In July, new energy vehicle exports hit 213,000 units, up 120% year-over-year. In markets like Thailand, Brazil, and Australia, Chinese brands are seeing rapid sales growth, starting to challenge the dominance of traditional European, American, and Japanese automakers. This is the power of industrial policy. Government resource mobilization over a decade built a global industrial champion. But economics tells us every decision has a price. The 2023 data point sparked controversy. China's solar panel production capacity could churn out 61 gigawatts. Global demand? Less than 450 gigawatts. Western media called it overcapacity. But the Chinese industry had a different take. Is this capacity reserves prepared for global energy transition or genuine overproduction? Behind the debate lies a difference in development models. China uses a production-oriented model, prioritizing investment in infrastructure and industrial capability. In 2023, consumption accounted for 40% of GDP, below the global average of 57%. But investment share far exceeded the West. This isn't a flaw, it's a choice. Trading high investment rates for industrial upgrading and technological breakthrough. The result is that China became the world's manufacturing hub. It accounts for 32% of global manufacturing, but only 12% of consumption. Large volumes of products get exported overseas. In 2024, the trade surplus approached $1 trillion. In economic terms, this is production capacity exceeding internal demand. Whether it constitutes overcapacity depends on whether global demand can absorb it. Looking at prices, they've definitely dropped fast. Solar panel prices fell 21% in 2024. Battery storage costs dropped 33%. But is this a vicious price war or cost reduction driven by technological progress? Two interpretations coexist. Chinese companies and economists lean toward the latter. Economies of scale, technological innovation, and supply chain optimization together drive down costs. In 2025, Bloomberg predicts clean energy costs will drop another 2 to 11%, with declines of 22 to 49% possible. That's a massive contribution to global energy transition. But some leading company stocks have faced pressure. LONGi Green Energy, Mingyang Smart Energy, and Trina Solar all went through corrections. The reasons are complex. Intense short-term industry competition, global economic cycles, and capital market reevaluation of new energy valuations all play a role. New energy storage installations in 2025 grew 30% compared to the end of 2023. The industry is still developing rapidly. International trade friction followed. In April 2025, the US slapped a 34% tariff on Chinese goods. On Southeast Asian solar products, tariffs hit 651% and even 3,500%. The stated reason? Anti-dumping, anti-subsidy. But the real agenda? Industrial protectionism. From a trade theory perspective, this touches on a core question. When a country systematically lowers costs through institutional advantages, is that normal comparative advantage or unfair competition? Economists are divided. Supporters argue any country can choose its industrial policy. Japan, South Korea, Europe, and the US have all heavily supported domestic industries. Critics say the scale of subsidies is too large and distorts markets. Chinese companies' response is a localization strategy. Building factories in Brazil, Mexico, Hungary, Thailand, Turkey, Indonesia, and Uzbekistan. Producing directly in local markets, multiple overseas factories came online in July 2025, with initial capacities ranging from 100,000 to 300,000 units. This creates local jobs and eases trade tensions. From an economic perspective, this is shifting from trade globalization to investment globalization, no longer just exporting products, but exporting entire supply chains. Technology, management, logistics. This is a deeper form of globalization. The essence of this clash is a collision of development models. The Western model emphasizes spontaneous market adjustment and consumption-driven growth. The advantage is flexible resource allocation. The Chinese model emphasizes strategic government guidance and production-driven growth. The advantage is the ability to concentrate resources for technological breakthroughs. Both models have pros and cons. Hard to say which is better. From a global perspective, the impact is double-edged. For consumers, electric vehicle and solar panel prices have dropped dramatically. Clean energy has become accessible. In the first quarter of 2025, wind and solar generation accounted for 22.5% of China's total electricity consumption, exceeding tertiary industry and urban-rural residential consumption. This proves that technology is mature and viable. Global energy transition is accelerating because of this. That's crucial for addressing climate change. For industries, adjustment pressures are real. Chinese companies face fierce domestic competition. Foreign companies face cost pressures. Trade barriers keep rising. But this is also forcing technological innovation and business model upgrades. In 2025, the solar industry officially entered the era of market-based grid pricing. Driving down levelized cost of electricity through technological innovation became top priority. The shift from channel-driven to technology-driven growth is healthy in the long run. Economics doesn't offer perfect answers. Can high investment be sustained? Can global markets absorb the capacity? Can technological innovation keep pace? Will trade friction escalate? These questions are all finding answers through this great game. But one thing is clear: the scaling and commoditization of clean energy is irreversible. In August 2025, new energy vehicle sales data showed industry growth starting to slow. Some automakers saw year-over-year declines in single months. Plug-in hybrid sales dropped noticeably. This might signal that even with powerful state backing, companies still have to face the test of real market demand. When a country throws its full weight behind an industry, what's the economic logic of this experiment? We've seen the complete chain, from the low-end manufacturing trap of 2010 to the strategic pivot of 2015 to systemic state support mechanisms, and finally to the global game triggered by overcapacity. This isn't just government subsidizing companies. It's an entire development model. Production first, government guidance, winning through scale. What has it changed? In a decade, China turned clean energy from a Western-dominated high-end industry into a China-dominated mass-market industry. Solar panel prices dropped 80%. Electric vehicles went from rich people's toys to everyday choices. Global energy transition accelerated because of this. That's a positive signal for tackling climate change. But the cost is overcapacity, trade friction, and concentrated industrial chain risks. When most of the world's clean energy products come from one country, that's both an efficiency victory and a risk concentration. Economics offers no perfect model, only trade-offs. Markets versus government, efficiency versus equity, short-term versus long-term, national interest versus global interest. The balance is always being sought through this ongoing game. This experiment continues. Where will the equilibrium point land? Maybe we'll only see clearly a decade from now. But one thing is certain: this world has been changed, and there's no going back.